another episode of Talk with Renee Dallow. It is me, Renee Dallow. I've had a lot of ice. I'm just going to say, I came from lunch with a friend. They gave me 3 iced teas. I am on fire, caffeinated. I'm here with the lovely and talented Meghan Ely. Meghan! Hi.
Hey, oh my God, you did have 3 iced teas, didn't
I
you?
really did. I really did. Normally, Meghan and I just talk all day long on Voxer, so seeing her face is a whole new
I
experience for
know.
everybody.
It's so different
Yeah.
for us. We're either in person or Voxer, never this medium. So this is exciting. Except the 2 other times I've been on. I feel like I'm honored because I don't think many get to the third
You
realm here.
are the first to be on 3 times. The genesis of this conversation today came from a Voxer that you and I were sort of going
Yes.
back and forth for. And then finally it was like, we need to just put this on the podcast because we have thoughts.
This is good stuff.
It is good stuff. Our topic today is talk about overnight success.
Yeah.
I feel like I already know y'all are going to email me about this episode. So I'm just going to put it on. Yeah, fine. Email me. Tell me your thoughts about this episode because.
And if you want to contact me, you just email Renee.
I'll forward it. Read her your emails on Voxer. But Meghan, why don't you tell the folks what brought this about? What were we?
Okay. Let's set the stage.
Yeah.
Well, it's always been a thing. The idea, the myth, if you will, like spoiler alert, we both feel it's a myth of the overnight success. I have been in the wedding industry for 20 years, but 15 with OFD as a speaker. And you and I are both fellow speakers. That's how we really met, became friends, and all the things, and so on and so forth. And we're at an interesting time of year. I call this submission season, not wedding submission season, but it's speaker submission season. We've got TSC Cater Source at the time of this recording just rolled out for 2025. Wedding MBA, again, at the time of this recording, their form is closing shortly. They're doing a speak off. Like a lot of people have their eye on the prizes. We just wrapped up Engage. It finished up their form at the end of January. So this is a big time of year where people are, you've got a lot of people who have gratefully been on stages like you and I, and we're like, okay, we need to get back into the swing of things. And then you have people kind of eyeing that top prize of the national stage. And in the midst of this is a time of year where I have a lovely course of folks who I chat with, and I also train speakers. So it's just I live in it, but this is the season. And so it started very innocuously, just kind of a chit chat as you and I do. And it's the thought of, am I ready to submit myself? At the time, the conversation was around wedding MBA, just because the nature of the timing of it.
Yeah.
And I said, it's so interesting who perceives whether I'm ready or not, the royal am I or not. It's not up for to decide. But it's interesting when people look at and make that decision for themselves. And so I said, Renee, I went back and did some numbers. I went back because I just was at a point where I'm like, well, when was I ready? Like, was I ready before I was ready? And the numbers were kind of shocking. I think the biggest number I want to focus on. So I've been speaking at Winning MBA for about a decade now. Don't ask me the exact date and time, but it's something along those lines as well. But I went back and I did some numbers. And what it came down to is the number of speaking engagements I had before I went on the stage at Wedding MBA, and it was for a 10-minute talk all those years ago. The number of, I should say, speaking engagements / lectures at the college level, it totaled about 165. I had spoken 165 times. Now, let me say real quick,
That's such a huge number.
100, but I said, even if you want to break it down very, very honestly, I'm very transparent.
Yeah.
About half of those, again, college lectures,
Yeah.
hour plus slides, that's that. But the other half, so if you want to say, well, forget that, I can't compare apples to apples, well, then fine. Slash that in half and say 80. I did minimally 80 speaking engagements, minimally.
Yeah.
On top of 12 of those being national engagements as well, not webinars, not summits, like this is live speaking. And it was like 1,900 plus days from the day I started OFD to when I got on the stage to do a 10-minute talk and then you looked at and so we started talking about that and saying, it's so different now. And you and I are going to dig into probably why we think that is.
Mm-hmm.
But for people who have known us nationally, they didn't see all those years of driving 6 hours round trip to teeny weeny little associations. They didn't see any of that. And so they think, am I ready? I'm like, well, you've done 3 live engagements ever. Do you think you're ready do you want to do your first shot like that? But you see, so then it got us into talking.
Yeah.
Like this number. So then you started talking about like the preconceived notions of you and being that overnight success.
Yeah. So it's interesting. And we're talking about this for those listening, in the context of I had just done the keynote at Wedding MBA, right?
Yep.
And those who listen to the show know, go back to the episode I did where it was like a week in the life at Wedding MBA. Like you hear my in real time, like all the feelings, thoughts, whatever that happened
Yeah.
that week. But after I did the keynote the next day, someone that I know as an acquaintance came up to my booth and said, "You did a good job. That's going to be me next year." Right. And listen, I am here for confident women in business. I am here for shooting your shot. I am here for putting yourself out there. Like I'm actually here for starting before you think you're 100% ready. But it
Mm-hmm.
did make me think, right? That we sort
Yeah.
of live in this environment now I think because of TikTok and Instagram and
Yep.
being creative, like we also have to be creators of content that, and also I think there's a piece, well, I'll take that piece out. I think right now what we're talking about is this idea that it's easy because people are talking to camera a lot more than they used to 10 years
Yes.
ago, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
also think there's a piece of it that I think that really talented speakers and really skilled speakers, right? So both talent and skill
Yep.
make it look easy.
Yes. There's a, and may I add to that?
Yeah.
You see the talent and the skills and all the things, and you see what goes into it, but also there's an accessibility to those people
Mhm.
who there's an accessibility through social and what have you, so they're like, well, they're just like me,
Right.
so I there you go, I can do that right away. And I think our goal today is not to like crush hopes and
No, no,
dreams,
no, no.
but it's to like, let's talk about it, let's dig into all the things that we had to do and what others should be doing to kind of build to that stage. For every engagement at MBA or engage or whatever, they don't see me re-listening to all of my talks and the continue education and the things that go into being a live event speaker.
Yeah.
It's not just a little bit of luck and
Right.
stardust to
Right.
get me up there.
Well, exactly. So that person said it to me, and I sort of said like, "Well, good luck with it." And I go, "But it took me 8 years, right?" So I just kind of want to set the expectation that like you see those of us who get to be on the big stages, and it's never overnight. Like I know that from my acting career, I know that from this career. It's
Yep.
just a matter of how long are you willing to keep in the game. I was watching this, it was actually a TikTok a couple of days ago with Bryce Howard, who's the daughter of Ron
Yeah.
Howard. Did you see this one?
Was it the makeup thing or was it some?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Bryce was being interviewed and she was talking about the struggle of acting, which, she's a Nepo baby, so like grain of salt. But she was saying that her acting coach said to her, "Do you know the statistic of how many auditions an actor typically has to go on before they get cast?" And she said, "I don't know, like 1 in 10." And her acting coach said, "No, it's 1 in 68. You have to
Mm-hmm.
audition 68 times to get one role." And I can tell you from my own experience as an actor, that's 100% true.
Yeah.
I would imagine that if anyone ran the stats on public speaking in the wedding industry, because the opportunity pool is much smaller, uh,
Mm-hmm.
I would think it's probably 1 in 50. I don't know. I think there's
Mm-hmm.
so many things that we all, raise our hand for, and how many of them are a possibility to be filled. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I'm again, we're not here to like poo poo anybody, but just to sort of set, I think, more realistic expectations of what.
Yeah, expectations and mindset as well. It's one of those things where, I speak at Wedding MBA with Terica, who is amazing, and I feel so grateful to be next to her. But what they don't see is I book a lot of smaller things with Shannon's permission and small but mighty groups, and I run that. That's not my first time doing that live. You know what I mean? And so it's kind of one of these. Well, what could people do? And I'm always, I guess my biggest lesson is don't discount one. It's like, don't discount all the great smaller opportunities out there, the summits and the podcasts and the things where you can work that out. But in addition to it, when we're talking about overnight success, obviously Renee and I are talking more about the speaking side of it,
Yes.
but also know that speaking on the virtual scene is great, but it's not the same as commanding an actual stage. And so there has to be time to build that in as well. Like even when I talked to Shannon about my numbers, I told her, she's like, "Well, that's unusual." I'm like, "It is, but it's also a testament to like chipping away at it over time, you know?"
Megan, when you were younger, like grade school or high school, did you do
Yeah.
theater? Did you perform at all?
Okay, I did not, but I had two things going for me. One, my dad's DNA. My dad is a natural Like he's naturally a public speaker. As someone who was most talkative in junior high and high school, thank you. I
Okay,
won both of them.
me too.
I was impressed that he could go do trainings and things and people. So I had that going for me. But really, what it was, and it's been so fun. So for those who know, I have a kiddo named Oliver. He's almost 11, and Renee, who knows who Oliver it is, but I actually was able to see this more recently with him. Is I went to a school that put you in front of your peers very early on. So I was presenting at first grade, second grade, third grade. I was presenting in Spanish by high school,
Wow.
15 minutes at a time. And with recently, my son, who's fifth grade, and he was Cleopatra, and he had to dress like Cleopatra
I saw
and do like a 5 minute presentation, and it was so great. I got to see it on their Insta stories. But you got to get comfortable early. So I didn't have a theater background, but I had plenty of, and I know I was very privileged to be in a position where I happened to go to school. My dad worked 2 jobs to put me through to a school that allowed for that. And I think that's what it is. It's this natural like bit about people who can be on stage, but it's also that type A and that real with a little bit of shades of Enneagram 3, like determinism to get it right too, because you can't live on charm alone.
No, no, you
With
definitely
that,
not.
people will see there's nothing, but you were, I mean, you had that theater background, and when I talk about you to people too, which I do, and I'll say, well, she also had a 4-year degree in theater. Like you can't replicate that with a few webinars, you know?
No, no. And that's the thing I think that's an important distinction. And that's why I asked, like, do you have that performance
Yeah.
background? Because there are things that you can only learn by doing these things on stage in real time. Like
Hmm.
my first gig after the pandemic, well, whatever. When everything
I know what you mean.
when I decided it was safe to travel, I was in Dallas, speaking in front of a lovely group. But during my presentation, there was a table, like 8, pretty loud men who were talking to themselves, amongst themselves, and not listening to me.
Hmm.
And I could have ignored them, but I didn't because I'm me. And I thought to myself, after I sort of handled it or made a joke about it, but kind of tried to get them back into the fold because it was actually pretty distracting. Um,
Yeah,
that I was like, oh, if I were in year 1 of speaking, that would have crushed me. I would have withered and died
absolutely.
because 8 men decided I wasn't worthy to listen to in that moment,
Hmm.
and I think like those are the things that you cannot teach someone until they're standing up there sort of, dramatically fighting for your life. But like, listen to me, I've been paid to be here. Like I
I'm
have
yeah.
something to say.
Well,
Yeah.
you know what happened to me recently at TSC, not to brag, I lost 100% of my panel from the time of acceptance, and and it's a story unto itself that we do need to talk to about today. But we had a full room and we killed it with the people we had, and I said, I'm glad this happened to me now and not 10 years ago. Like I don't think I would have had the same wherewithal of how to do that. So but the other thing too, that you and I thought this was really interesting behind the scenes, it's not just about the practice and the training and all the things, but the one thing I like to talk to people about is, well, do you want to be ready for this? Like are you ready for what comes with this? I can't,
Yeah.
okay, I'm bringing in the royals, forgive me, but I used to teach this, is that it's that Oprah effect. Sometimes is not the right time and right place for someone, but you get Kate Middleton. When she gets engaged, she wears this sapphire blue dress in all her pictures, all the interviews, and what did everyone do? They bought it. And this company had already had some troubles. Like they were already in a little bit of trouble. It was not terra firma was not, and of course what happens, everyone buys the dress, they have to go get more money to get more dresses. They weren't ready. I mean, they just didn't know it was coming anyways, and it caused more problems, and the company shut down. So when we talk about overnight successes, well, for me, I would always rather incrementally chip away at what I consider success, which is different at the 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, 15-year mark.
Yeah.
You and I were just filling out our forms for B Sage conference, right? Shout out Michelle Loretta. And it was like, oh, success looks different now than even a couple of years ago. There are some opportunities I wouldn't have wanted. I've seen people crumble under and over, like a so-called overnight success, who have not done well because they didn't have, and it's not even the stamina. And I don't mean that. It's more of the infrastructure in place to handle a rise in popularity, right?
I mean, I felt a little bit of that. The first year I spoke at Wedding MBA, which was 2018, was the same year that I launched Wedding Management 101, which is my course about wedding management. And I launched it on
Yeah.
stage at Wedding MBA. And I did it all by myself. I recorded it in the middle of the night, edited it was DIY, friends. And at the time that I went to Wedding MBA, I didn't have an assistant or a VA or anything. So by the time I got off stage, we had sold I think 20, 25 units. We had like 25 students. I went on stage, 0 students, left with like 25 students. By the end of that week, I had over 100. I had no help.
Wow.
I've never hired someone more quickly in my life. Because I didn't know. I was like, I thought, well, probably no one's going to buy this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, wrong. And I had to scramble to catch up. Now, granted, it didn't break me, but there was a lot of stress headaches in that 2-week period because I was like, I knew kind of, but I didn't
Hmm.
really know until I got to
Yeah.
Wedding MBA. And that year was my first year. I had the worst time swap. Remember, I was like 8 a. Actually, this is before we worked together. I was
Yeah.
8 a.m., I believe, or 9 a. I was 8 a.m. the morning after the not wedding wire parties.
Oh.
I was like, nobody, because no one knew who I was. Shannon barely
Yeah.
didn't know me. She's taking a
Yeah.
chance on me. I bought donuts for the first 200 people in the room
You're so
because
sweet.
I was like, I thought it was going to be like me and my 3 friends from LA. I was like, no one's going to be
Yeah.
here. So I went on social media and I was like, free 200, like we have donuts. Like, were we allowed to do that? No. Did I do it anyway? Yeah. Like, I was
Whatever.
like, whatever. No one knows who I am. And
Yeah.
I think like some of these opportunities, like you said, it's like you don't really know until you're there and you know
Yeah.
what impact that's going to have. But you really do have to be ready in your infrastructure,
Yep.
and also like ready emotionally. Because I don't know if this happens to you, but every year that I speak on stage at Wedding MBA, I get a lot of emails after the fact. Some are very complimentary, and some are a little bit passive aggressively not.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
I did get a mix. I think I did more when I was whipper president, where people were not afraid to tell me what they thought about me. And so, yeah, and it is hard. You have to be able to know that that comes with it,
yeah,
and it brings up a good point. For me, I would say, and I wouldn't call this an overnight success, but one of my larger periods of growth, believe it or not, Clubhouse, that 6 week, 8 week
yeah,
period, Clubhouse was huge for me. And I had just spent the last year doing free education everywhere. I had spoken to thousands of wedding pros. I had added to my email list the open rate. So it was to help the industry,
yeah,
but it wasn't lost on me that when things picked back up, there was a really strong chance, right? That there was gonna be some growth. Thank goodness I was, X amount of years in business so that we could actually build an infrastructure for that, the people and so on and so forth. So when people come to us and they're just like, I'm going to be that next person, it's like it's not only let's set expectations, let's see how long it took for people and where they came from, and let's look at the things, right, that they can be doing. But it's also, have you primed the pump for that? Are you ready for that? You look at the people who are not ready for being Oprah's favorite thing. They want it,
yeah.
but it's not always the best thing for them. Not that I'm comparing any bit of my success to
I know
that,
what
but you
you
see
mean,
different
though.
levels.
I
Yeah.
mean, listen, if I were a different human after my first time at Wedding MBA, and I got a couple, 2 or 3 emails. Someone must have been trying to sell some diet pill that year, but I got 3 different emails from 3 different people that were like, you did a good job. We could help you lose weight if you want."
Oh my god.
Yeah. And I remember,
Are you serious?
"Where to you?" And I was like, who are you? And I thought like the first 2 that came in, I was like, oh, maybe I'll just send
Unbelievable.
some mailing list. And then someone else, the third one actually remarked on my outfit. So I was like, oh, you were there. Weird.
Oh, that's gross. I'd be like, "Let me tell you about my eating disorder." Like not making a joke. I mean, let me
No,
just
I
spend the
know.
next,
I
like, I will
know.
ruin you.
And
Oh, I
listen, it
hate
was a
hearing that
different
because
time.
people don't know where.
It was 2018.
Yeah.
Now I don't think it would happen, but now I get different. I mean, now I just get different responses, right? Like people always love to tell me about myself, and you just have to have a thicker skin. Um,
Yeah.
and I have the thick skin from my acting days, so it's fine. But when we're talking about this, people who want this, like, oh, I've never spoken at Wedding MBA, let me do the keynote next year. Um, I think that sort of there's a lot of steps in between, and you
Yeah.
had shared with me your stats about how many times you spoke before Wedding MBA. So I went back
Yeah.
and I did a little research of my own, starting with this. So I started my wedding planning business at the end of 2013. I launched my
Okay.
website 2014, and I did my first speaking gig in 2018, right? So that's, oh
Mhm.
no, sorry, it was 2017.
Yeah.
I'm 2017. I'm getting my years all confused. And when you look at that, you're like, oh, that's not a lot of time. Okay, but in those years between Wedding MBA was 2018. In between Wedding MBA and the start of my career, I was a rising tide leader in LA. So every
Okay.
single month, I got up in front of my people, like a couple hundred people, and I presented
Mhm.
every month. Now, was that monumental, huge? No, but it taught me
But
the
still.
skills on how to
Yeah.
facilitate, how to prepare, how to present, all these things. I also did a number of like super tiny, like chamber of commerce, 20 people in a breakfast in a room having breakfast, talking about the power of language with my little slides. Like I did
Yeah.
all of those things. This was
Mhm.
pre like online summits, right? So like
Yes.
I did all of that. And then my first time like speaking on a bigger stage was when Rising Tide leader Natalie Frank asked me to speak in LA. And I was
Mhm.
looking back on just like all my emails and my social media. I was like having like a this is your life moment like over this past weekend. And I remember that my mentor Allison Howard, who was my mentor when I first started as a wedding planner, she did this like weekend intensive but down in San Diego. And one of the gals who spoke, her name is Kathy, and she runs a company called Funnel Gorgeous right now. But
Mhm.
she was telling us, someone asked her, like, "Oh, how did you get started in public speaking?" Like during one of the breakout things. And she goes, "Oh, well, I kind of feel like you're ready to speak when someone asks you to speak."
Oof.
And I remember thinking that, like hearing that and thinking, it's probably true. And then in this current moment, looking back on everything, being like, yeah, my first time really speaking was when Natalie asked me to. And I just said, sure,
Yeah.
sure. So again, it's like, I'm all for putting yourself out there, raising your hand and saying, yay, me. But also, is there anyone in your universe asking you to speak? That's a clue
Yes.
too, of like that you
Yeah.
should put in the work and do it and like have all those little baby steps. Cause I feel like you need the baby steps. Um,
Yes. You need the panels with a good moderator.
yes.
You need the podcasts. You need to drive and do the Chamber of Commerce. You need to go.
Yes.
Yeah. I was going to say, do you remember your first like speaking thing ever? Was it Rising Tide? I mean, obviously you were in theater, but I was curious if you remember like your very I have one which I want to tell you.
My first one ever, I don't like my first little one, no, but my first big one was called Tide Talk. It was and that was a whole story. That's a whole story I can tell you because I just said yes because Natalie asked it.
Yeah.
I was pitching her Jasmine Star. I was like, I know Jasmine Star, I can get, and she's like, what about you? And I was like, what about me? She was like, you should do it. And I remember looking at my husband like, should I do it? And he's like, yes, yes, of course, say yes and figure it out later. And that's like a model of my
Oh.
life. But I was that night the least known person in the room. I was the
Uh-huh.
only one who I think I didn't have an email list, like, I had nothing. And it was the first
Uh-huh.
time I had said the words wedding management out loud. It was the first time I had talked about power of language. They put that on the internet because they could only sell 200 tickets, and something like
Mhm.
4,000 people watched it.
Oh.
So after that
Whoops.
in-person right? And again, like, I didn't know the impact, right? But what became, like, a
Yeah.
funny little ha-ha thing is that, like, anytime after that point that I'd go to a networking party that year, people that I
Yeah.
did not know would be like, "I know you." And I was like, no." Like, "I know, no, I know I saw
No.
you." And I was like, "I don't." And then finally, like, after it happened a bunch of times, it became this thing about like, "Oh, did you see me on the internet?" And they were like, "Yes." But this was again, like, 2016 or something.
That has different meaning now.
Different. Now we're all on the internet. So, yeah,
Oh.
that was the first time that, like, of note that I could say.
I was gonna say my first as OFD was I sat on ADJIA, like a DJ panel, and I was a venue person because I'd been in venues for years. But my first ever, you wouldn't even believe this, I was 23. I mean, and I did not wait to be asked. I was asking them, but the Richmond Bridal Association, it's a small local group, and I'd done some PR for them and so on and so forth. And was fresh off of Nike World Headquarters. I worked at there and I did an internship, and we were just learning all about millennials, except it was called Gen Y at the time.
Oh my god,
And I had,
remember?
yeah, Gen Y. If you used to
Oh.
type in Gen Y in weddings, I was at like the top of Google for years because it was just like I was the only one talking about it. And I was 23, and I got their permission to pull some of this stuff, and some of it was public domain. And I gave a whole presentation. I would kill for that like video, but not that there is one, but I'd love it. And I remember I went on stage, I presented, and they're like, "Oh my God, little Megan Belargin," which was my name at the time. And then one like old curmudgeon stands up and he just tells everybody why all of this is wrong. Like he was like, "This is not how it is," and da da da. It was at the time where it was like, do you remember how people weren't giving like digital images away yet? And, like people were just real sensitive.
Yeah.
And he stood up and said 100 things about why I was terrible. Now, luckily, everyone loved me at that group and ate them for breakfast. Like they were just ate them alive. Like it was like He was but, like, what a great start. What a dramatic
What?
start, but what a great start in all of that.
Yeah.
So, well, now I feel like I wanna interview you because I have another question. Can I ask you
Oh,
another
you
question?
can ask me whatever you want.
Okay, she was not ready for because I was like, "Oh, I wanna ask, was there any, like, obscure speaking engagement or a situation where and maybe you've already shared it, that you're really glad you went through just because it was such a great experience? You know, something where it was like, "That was so weird to do, but I'm glad I did it." And can I start for a second if that I figured, okay. So because I was like, "What is a weird thing that happened to me that I can look back and say, 'Oh, man, I'm glad I did.'" But I'll remember the first time I went down to I was at a it was well, it was an ABC group. It was one of the states. I'm not going to say who, blah, blah, blah. But I get there and none of my stuff is like they don't have a hotel room for me. Like they have, and the thing is now I can put a credit card down and
Right, but back
I
then,
have a contingency fund.
yeah.
But like then I was like,
You're
oh
like,
my
"All right,
God, what do I do? They didn't have like the person running it, like had none of my stuff. Everything was wrong. And it was like the tiniest group of 10 people, I think. But I was so glad because everything went wrong. I mean, I did well, but everything did wrong went wrong for details. And then also I learned how to pump up a group. Not that I'm like a big inspirational person, but how do you put energy into a room when there's only 10 people there? So I just wanted to like
right."
toss that out as thank goodness I had those
Yeah.
experiences as much as it sucked.
I
Do you have any?
I I mean, I'm sure there was probably some, like, rising tide, like, struggle bus that I was on, but the one that came to mind
Mhm.
when you said that was my first year speaking at Alt Summit in Palm Springs. I did a keynote
Yeah.
presentation with my podcast co-host at the time, Mindy, and I had never presented with anyone before, and
Oof, that's hard.
it was tough, and we were I am a rehearser, like, I like so we rehearsed a little bit, probably not as much as I would have liked to, but then also so many things were like weird about the room. Like we weren't really on a stage. We were in a conference room. There was no stage, and it was just like we had to stand in front of the screen, and everyone was on these round tables. But the
Yeah.
room was huge, and like, listen, public speakers, like we all have this like weird. I have a weird room thing where I'm like, oh, this room, the energy.
Yeah.
And then I remember just because I had been so used to presenting on my own that we had tried to divide the slides up between us, but we didn't mark them, and
Mhm.
so I just went on a tangent, like, my ADHD took over, and I was like, "Phew," and then, like, Mindy didn't talk for, like, 10 minutes, and she was so pissed at me. Rightly so, rightly so. Later that week,
Oh,
we actually sat in on another duo presenting, and they put their photo and their name on the bottom of the slides that were theirs, and I was like, "That's a genius
oh,
thing. Why didn't
that's a
we
way to
think of
do it
it?
too.
Why didn't we think of it?"
Well, that's the
Yeah.
thing is learn having the experience. That's the thing is so when I caution people about expediting, what I tell people is you get one shot. I mean, isn't that what Eminem says? You get that one shot, and so you get on that one shot on stage.
Yeah.
Is it your best foot forward with so little experience? I was just thinking when you speaking with someone is very difficult. Like I can't imagine being on stage with most people. But let me give you an example of Terica, right?
Yeah.
Tarek and I practice in a very different way because we're not in the same city, but we make it work. It's our thing, so on and so forth. She won't mind me sharing this year. So I was in charge of really that timing of the slides, and we do trends, which is very slide heavy. But you have no giving this as many times as I have, you run the risk of going too fast.
Mm,
So I'm on stage with her, and she's killing it, and it's her turn. Like we're kind of lobbing it back and forth, and we know when we're doing it. And I looked at and I realized that we're too fast. We're just too fast and because we don't get to practice a million times together, but I know the markers. You should be here at 5 minutes, this at 7. Like that's a part of being a good speaker.
yeah.
So I thought, how do I communicate her to her without throwing her off? Like obviously that for those who can't see us right now, but that slowing down is something you could do, but that looks very unprofessional on a huge stage like that.
Yeah.
So while all eyes were on her being fabulous, there was a timer in the front. There's always like
Yeah.
this clock countdown. And I very gingerly, when everybody's looking at her, is I took it and I just barely nudged it. So instead of facing us straight on, it was angled at her. And that's all she needed to know to slow it down. And I was like, thank God.
Because she's Terica, and she's done
'Cause
this a
she's done
million
it 1,000 times. I know that's another one that people would say, another person where they're like, well, she just really, I'm like, do you know how many years? I remember
years.
seeing her speak at B Stage like years
Years.
ago. So
Years. The other thing I
yeah.
want to talk about overnight success wise, and I'm already resigned that this is going to be a long episode. Sorry, y'all.
Okay, I'm ready. I know when you were like maybe 30 minutes, I was like, oh, okay, because that always happens with us.
Specifically speaking about wedding MBA, I want to talk a tiny bit about my journey to get there. Um,
Yeah.
So I attended Wedding MBA in 2020, no, 2014 and 2015. And
Mhm.
2015 was the year that I was like, I could do that. I want to be on stage. And
Mhm.
when I had that thought, I want to be clear that it wasn't like I want to glorify myself by putting myself on stage. What I thought
Sure.
was, I have some shit to say.
Yeah.
I have some stuff to teach here. So I went to my mentor, Allison Howard, who was a speaker at Wedding Nabe at the time. And I said,
Mhm.
what do I have to do what do I have to do? How do I get involved here? And she said, let me see if I can connect you with Shannon. That was in 2015. It took me 2 years to get an audition with Shannon.
Mhm.
When it finally came through, and I had been emailing a perfectly respectable amount, I think I was not super obnoxious.
We'll have to ask her.
No, don't bring it up. Don't bring it up. But I finally got an email from Shannon offering me an audition in 2017,
Uh-huh.
about 3 weeks before Wedding MBA itself, saying, "Can you come on the Sunday before the Monday of Wedding MBA and audition?" At that
Mhm.
time, I had no ticket to Wedding MBA, and I had no plan to be in Vegas. I just wasn't going to go that year. And again,
Yeah.
I turned to Joe and I said, "I think we have to go to Vegas." Which I live in LA. It's a 4-hour drive. Joe and I go to Vegas constantly. It's fine. But pretty much like the only option was, yes, I'm going to Vegas to audition in person.
Yeah.
So even though I had not planned to attend Wedding MBA at all. So we made our plans and I bought a new dress and I believe I had 10 minutes. And I had 10 minutes
Yes.
I had to do 10 minutes in slides, and it was like, give us your best 10 minutes. And it was very much an audition, like there
Mhm.
there was a waiting room and there was a monitor in the waiting room, and I went in on a Sunday morning and they let my husband sit in the back, which I think he still has that video on his phone somewhere.
Oh my gosh, I will have
Uh-huh.
to talk to him because I would love to see
I
that.
To this day, he's mad at me because I've never watched it. It's like, "You have to watch it. It was great." And I'm like, "I won't watch it." Um, and I rehearsed my ass off and I got in there. I did my 10 minutes, and there were 2 people in the room aside from Shannon that I knew, because I didn't know Shannon at all, but I knew the 2 other people, and they engaged me
Mhm.
in some, like, chit chat. I was shaking, like, trying to keep it, like,
Aw.
chill, but, like, my core was like, and
Yeah.
then they thanked me, and I went along my way, and then Joe and I went out
She's
together.
like, "Then I barfed."
I didn't actually, but we went to get because I hadn't
No,
eaten
I'm just
today.
kidding.
So then we went to get Italian food
Yeah.
and we drove home. We like literally got in the car and drove. We were in Vegas for like, you know, 36 hours or something. And that was the year, unfortunately, of the shooting at Mandalay Bay.
Yep.
We drove, if you know Vegas, like we got back on the 5, which is right by Mandalay Bay, to go home.
Mhm.
And, we were driving through the desert when the tragedy occurred. So by the time we got to good cell signal, half the people that I knew were like, "Oh my God, are you okay? Are you okay?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" Because we had basically
Sure.
driven out sort of like an hour before it happened. The MBA journey, even just to get on the stage the first time, was
Mhm.
long. And then once
Yeah.
I got word that I would be doing it, which I didn't get, so that was October that year. And then
Mhm.
I did not know that I was going to Wedding MBA until February or late
Mhm.
January of 2018. I
Mhm.
immediately hired a speaking coach.
Yeah. I don't think people know that about you sometimes. You know what I mean? That you had I've done some continuing education as well, and it that people don't realize that, there it's an art unto itself, right? It's why you bring it's like you don't become a florist and not have some semblance of training, self-train something.
Right, well,
You don't become an
I think the training aspect is interesting because, again, like we mentioned earlier, I think people think this is like a God-given talent, or you have it or you don't, or,
yeah.
um, I am a naturally good public speaker, and I'm also trained, right?
Yeah.
Like, very specifically trained about, like, how to move my hands in a certain way to communicate a certain thing, and I did not wing it. I didn't, like, rest on my laurels. I didn't say, like, "Well, we'll see how this goes." Like, I did everything in my power to control it as much as I could,
Mhm.
to know that whatever happened when, like, once I got on the stage was what was gonna happen, but I needed to prepare myself, um, sort of impeccably for that moment because I didn't know that I would get another shot, like you said.
Yeah, you really don't. And that's the thing is too is for those who are listening and they're like, well, I feel like I'm already there and I'm getting my shot and all this stuff is I think you said the perfect thing is the importance of not resting on your laurels either.
Yeah.
I think that's important. It's my wedding MBA story is less so. It's I was an ACE thought leader and they pitched me. It was I didn't have to apply, but over the years, I take it very seriously. But it reminds me of my story of like because I think I'm the second longest running like wedding pro educator who was
Yeah.
there from like the wedding wire days. It's like
Yeah.
Ellenberg and myself. And I'd have to double check on the not side to see how far back they go, but I'm one of the OGs at this point. And it was a lot of like head down, getting it done, holding myself at the standard. I used to joke that I think they just kept me for all those years ago because I just turned everything in on time and I studied it. I looked at all my things.
That's
I
so
wrote
important too.
yeah, but I never took for granted, and I still don't take for granted the opportunities that are like
Yeah.
not handed to me, the ones that I earn over time, and the ones that you earn. We just can't. You got to be careful for those who are starting to hit like these. Let's say because at the time of this recording, the speak off for Wedding MBA is coming up,
Yeah.
and right now I'm sure the engaged ladies are deliberating over everyone that
Right.
turned in. It's like, man, if I could give one piece of advice, it'd be like you've got it's not you get the goal of whatever that is and it doesn't stop there. Like you still hold yourself to an incredibly high standard because what you have is what so many other people want. Like it's not lost on me that my spot is never saved at wedding MBA.
Same.
I know my numbers, I know what I do. Wedding with the wedding pro education side of it over the years, you just have to you got to hit all your markers all the time. So
Yeah.
I guess that's the big question too is we talk about are you ready for whatever that success, that step looks like, but do you have the bandwidth to operate at this high level all the
All
time?
the time.
The end. You know what I mean?
Did I ever tell you
Mhm.
about the 2021 wedding MBA after we had come back from being off in 2020? Did I ever tell you about the me in the hallway with Christy Osborne? Oh,
No.
okay. So tiny backstory.
Maybe, but no.
So 2020, obviously, none of us were traveling to speak anywhere, but that was a year that I think I did like 52 webinars or something insane.
It was
Yeah,
wild.
I
You
did
did
so
do
many.
52.
It was like I had done one every week, although that wasn't the cadence. It was like there would be
Yeah.
3 a week and then nothing. It didn't occur to me, you're gonna laugh at me. It did not occur to me until I was literally standing outside in the hallway at Wedding MBA before about to go in, that my visibility had
Mhm.
increased exponentially from 2019 to 2021.
Yep.
It
Same.
when you're just in your life, right? I don't like walk
Mhm.
around all day being like, well, now there's 10,000 people on my email list. Like it doesn't, it just happens slowly. And
Yeah.
and the numbers are the numbers, but then you think like, oh, they're human people behind those numbers. And so I was in the hallway. It was the Monday slot, and I think I was second or third. Yeah, I wasn't first that year. I was second or third, and I was in the hallway talking to Christy Osborne, good friend of both of ours.
Mhm.
And I was like kind of pacing a little and like I got like the wiggles and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I realized that what was happening was I was watching everyone walk in the room right before my talk.
Yeah.
And I had this feeling that like, oh, they expect something of me now. In
Mhm.
2018, no one gave a shit about me. No one knew who I was. 2019, a couple people knew who I was. But then 2020 happened and 10,000 more people knew who I was. And
Yeah.
now I'm about to walk on stage, and those people in there likely already have a preconceived idea of who I am because they've seen me
Yeah.
on the internet.
The expectations are higher. They just are.
They
Like,
just
that's the
are.
thing,
And
as you build a strong base and
Christy
and hit those goals.
had to give me a rose quartz because she was like, "I think you're
Oh
having a
my
little bit of panic
gosh.
attack." And I was like, "Is that what this is?" And she's like, "You need to breathe." And she's like, "Put this rose quartz in your bra." And I was like,
Oh
"Not
my
this one, the
gosh.
small one." And I was like, "I will. I will.
I was like, "What?"
Not this one. This is a big one." But I literally was like, "Thank God for good friends." But also, like,
Yeah.
it didn't occur to me that that's a thing until I was in that moment. And so I think that's relevant for today's listeners
Yeah.
now, especially for folks who are getting a big following on socials, but who haven't
Mhm.
done the in person thing
Yeah.
or haven't done a lot, like, not to freak you out. There is a higher expectation on you because these people think that they know you. And they do. They
Yeah.
know that version of you. You have to have the skills and the discipline and the rehearsals time behind you to bring it because you won't get a second chance if you fuck it up.
Mhm. That's the thing is, yeah, there really isn't, and it's not lost on me that yes, you can build social credit with a lot of what you do over the years and put in that good faith effort. And wedding MBA during 2020, we actually did all virtual. Remember, I actually spent, I mean, that was a tough year for everybody, and
Ooh,
I spent like $600 to like have someone do. I bought all this equipment on top of that,
yep.
but then I spent like $600 to have it all edited beautifully for Shannon, and it was just, I was paying it forward to the people who were coming, and I took it very seriously. But I don't know, my point was the investment of that, but then the expectations are there. And so that's one of those things. And I think if I may add one more thing, and I know we could be careful with time here, but it's also, I know today's talk is overnight success. So what does success mean to people? To these days, success looks differently than 15 years ago in the wedding industry. Today, it's like, well, I want a billion followers on Instagram and all those things. And it's like, and not to do big, that not sponsored by B Sage, but I can't help but talk about her all the time. So, Michelle Loretta does my numbers and my money. And I'm always like, listen, success to me, I can pay my bills, I can pay myself. For me, success is I want to be able to continue to do this as long as I choose to do this. And so I guess people need to look at their success metrics too. Like,
Mhm.
as much as we have expectations, people have expectations on us. What are our expectations of that success? I'm going to be on the stage at Engage, Wedding MBA, TSC. What do you think is going to happen on
Why?
the other side of
Yeah.
that? Right?
Yeah.
Is that the magic bullet? It probably isn't. It's
No.
probably a lot of little things you're doing to build to that successful model, you
Yeah.
know?
I also will say, like, for me, success for the speaking engagements is all about transformation. Am I
Mhm.
transforming someone's mindset, business, day, year? I don't know, but I want them to be one way before they hear me and a different way after I'm done.
Yeah.
It has very little to do with wanting me, like wanting their attention on me. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that that is often missed in newer speakers. They spend a lot of time talking about themselves.
Yeah.
If I'm talking about myself, it's under the umbrella of storytelling, right? I'm taking a story from my own experience and relating it to the topic at hand. But anyone
Mhm.
who's heard me speak, I mean, I do one slide, 4 bullet points. This is what you need to know about me that relates to what the topic. Here's why I'm qualified. Move on. Like the speakers
Mhm.
that I've found that I do not that are not successful for me are the ones who talk a lot about themselves with no point. I need you to get to
Yeah.
the place of transformation. Um,
Mhm.
and as far as like the bigger business, right? Um, success for me is I don't want to work every single weekend.
Yeah.
I
I
don't want to do
know.
that.
And that may not equate to a billion followers and brand deals and a million, and that's okay. You're the one who knows your metrics for success,
Yeah.
that what you can do. So I guess it's like, are we poo-pooing the overnight success? Maybe we are. But there are steps people can take to get to a level of success, whatever that is for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think if what piqued your interest about this is like wanting the clue, like tell me about the overnight success. There is no such thing, but I think the biggest thing we can tell you, at least I'll say, is that in order to get from where you are to where you want to go, especially if where you want to go is wedding MBA or Oprah, you know what I mean? There's a ladder that gets you there. It is not a trampoline. It is not a springboard, right?
Yeah.
It's steps. And so say yes to all those little tiny speaking gigs. Create space where you can educate, right? And develop your skill. Like get a coach,
Yes.
take a course, you know,
Mhm.
get real self-aware about how you look and sound and act on stage. Also, like not to be boring as shit, but like get good at making slides. Like
Oh yeah, that too.
there's an art to
But practice, it's the whole 10,000, you gotta do things for 10,000. I know it's been debunked,
oh,
but oh, what?
no, no, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, do you know what I used to do when I first, and I know, I gotta say, I forgot to mention this. So the very beginning, when I wanted to do more speaking, you know what I did? Is I made my own workshop. It was called
Yes,
Illuminate the Workshop. And I had a logo and everything, and I would invite people. It was 50, then 100, and it sold out. And people came to like it with around Virginia,
yeah.
but I created opportunities. I would reach out to the colleges and universities before I became like an adjunct professor, and I would pitch myself like, just you've got to make the opportunities because they're not coming for you.
100% you do. No, something you said about the 1,000 hours. So if you listen to my episode about a week in the life at Wedding MBA, you probably maybe I said this, but right before I went on stage for the keynote last year, I had a lot of
Mhm.
like sensation. I don't want to call it nerves, but like there was just a lot going on in my body, right? I was very aware of what was about to happen. I also knew that I had to rise. Like there was no like deflating under the attention. I had to rise to the attention. And I
Yeah.
remember literally standing on the stairs, waiting to go up. And I think Clint was like actually announcing me. And I just kept repeating to myself, "You've done this 1,000 times. You've done this a
Yeah.
thousand times." Because I know I said to my husband later, that's what I was saying. And he goes, "Because you have literally done it 1,000 times." And I'm like,
Yep.
if you count all the performing I've ever done, hundreds of thousands of times. But like
Yeah.
just having that be true, right? You've done this 1,000 times. This is just 1,001. You can do this, right?
Mhm.
It's like new level, new devil. You have to be
Yeah.
ready for those new levels, the only way I have found is you got to take all the baby steps in between.
You absolutely do. I'm always commenting maybe it's because all the guys out back love Star Wars like I do. So maybe that's my thing. You've got a mantra and you're about to walk on, and then I'll be like, no, this is my favorite Jedi. And they're like, Megan, get on stage. Stop talking about Star Wars and get up there. But no, no, you're right. You're right. It's a lot of little steps. And I hope that our talk today for people it doesn't discourage. If anything, it encourages, and it takes a step back, and their mindset goes, well, what are the opportunities I could be creating myself? Maybe, should I be going to some of these conferences just to check them out? Should I sit on panels, which is what opened all the doors to me? I actually just was in line at Starbucks at TSC Cater Source, and I ran into Tara, and I go, Tara, like, still kicking it 14 years, and she gave me my first shot
Yeah,
because someone canceled, and she gave me the spot because someone told her to.
yeah,
There were 3 hours ago and I didn't have a presentation, and she gave me the shot, and I knew I couldn't screw it up, and that was like many years into OFD, several years. And so it was so cool to see that full circle. And that's what I want for your listeners.
yeah,
I want them to get on the other side of this. And whatever that level of success they want, they might see what we're doing and be like, no, thanks. They might have it, like, frankly, they could have a higher, they're like, well, I want to be
yeah,
fine. You go on Oprah. And I hope they're encouraged and to have that full circle moment where they're really proud of what are the steps it took to get there.
yeah. I'll co-sign doing panels. I've traveled just to be on panels when I was first
Oh, yeah.
starting. And people would be like, "Why are you traveling to get on panel?" I'm like, "Because this is the game. You
It's
gotta be
great
there. You gotta
experience.
be
In a
there."
good panel, I mean, I trained the WIPA directors of education last year. Mark Addington kindly brought me in, and I just poo-pooed all over panels saying they're done poorly most of the time.
Yep.
There's a reason mine are good. And and I have like a whole guide to it. And it's like panels are some of the best things we've ever. Well, you were there. You had just spoken at WIPA Las Vegas, so you couldn't unfortunately be on our panel, but you saw the magic of a great panel and what that can
Yeah.
do.
If the
So
vibes are right on a panel, it's really electric and really,
yeah, it can be done
yeah,
really
it really
well.
just like
So
fires on all cylinders. It's great. So,
yeah.
in summary, go
And
get all your little breadcrumbs out. Get those speaking gigs out. Um, Megan, where can people find you on the internet?
ofdconsulting.com, really beginning, middle, and end. And where you can find me commenting on cat videos at TikTok, but like that's not what you asked. People can find me at ofdconsulting.com professionally.
Professional.
That is where they can find me, and that's where you get connected to OFD Consulting over at Instagram as well, and on Voxer with you. If you can't
No,
find me, I'm
no
talking to
one's allowed
Renee
in the boxer.
probably.
It is unhinged. Um, you mentioned the speaking course. I know it's not open right now, but this course will
Yeah.
be evergreen. Talk about that a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do it once a year. It's something I'd always want to do. I have a great love of creating curriculum, and I'll be honest, like very candid with you, that I know there's a lot of courses out there. So I think that's what, not in speaking, but like I was just like, there's a lot of no, already out there. But I'm like, no, this, dang it, it's a quality what I want to do. And so I created, this is my third year doing it. We actually have 30 amazing students right now. A Winning Industry Speakers course is literally an 8-week course. It is everything in my brain dumped out into 8 weeks, 2 hours a week, which honestly, we get about 75% of the students come to. It's amazing.
Right.
We have a great course workbook. It is beginning, middle, and end. We spend so much time just honed in on what's my why, what do I want to do, all the things. And then we get into structure presentations all the way to pitching, being on stage. And then I have a bonus week, that 8th week, where we get into building thought leadership and building all those steps above and beyond. Like I need people to be seen on brides.com or special events or whatever. And so what I typically do historically is I will roll it out right after Wedding MBA, we will do a pre-launch every year. And it's really, I mean, it's all of my brain, heart, and guts but into a course. If that's what you want to see it looks like, that's what I do. And I've been proud to work with so many great people over the last several years.
I love that. You also did an episode with us, episode 31, talk about thought leadership. You and I talked about
Oh, you and I dug in,
really
man. When we
that
get into it, we get
episode.
into it.
I'm gonna link that episode below because it was such a good one. I think for anyone who was listening and like, I want to speak, but I don't know how to start, go to that episode because we talk a lot about how to get your topics and just
Hmm.
what it is like to be a thought leader. Just such a still such a strange title, but like, what else are you going to call people? Idea people.
Yeah, thank
Probably
you.
a good friend who I'm going to go talk to Voxer on in about 5 minutes. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week. Go get your tiny speaking gigs. Go get them. Bye.